Couple straight ahead, straight ahead.
We were kids with dreams and no sense of reality, and survived, and we're here. Those are the kind of moments in a life that you just don't get over.
So without any further ado, enjoy the show.
Thank you.
I always get a little nervous when you have to show a film here because in many ways it's like bringing something home to the family.
Yeah, it's shot in Toronto, but you're trying to make it look like New York. I said, yeah, that's great. That's not bad. Because the city's like an actor.
Premiering a movie that took me 20 years to make in front of 2,000 people makes me want to cry.
I mean, there was a time that I can remember when people said, well, film will die. It hasn't and it won't, and it's great.
Afterwards, yeah. It's now my pleasure to welcome our moderator for today, Eric Ohanek, and the producer, director, and cast from High Rise.
Well, good afternoon, and welcome to our press conference for High Rise. With us today, we have the film's director seated next to me, Ben Wheatley. Hello. Seated next to Ben, we have Tom Hiddleston, who takes on the core role of Dr. Robert Lang, who's the core character in the movie. Next to Tom, we have Luke Evans, who dons the part of Richard Wilder, a man whom Lang befriends during the course of the story. Next to Luke, we have Elizabeth Moss, who plays Richard's wife, Helen, a woman who Tom's character also befriends in a different way at a certain point in the movie. And last but not least, we have the film's producer, Jeremy Thomas. Now, High Rise was a part of the festival's new platform program. It had its world premiere at the Visa screening room of the Elgin Theatre last night. And I'll throw it open to you, Ben, and just talk about how things went last night. Very appreciative crowd, and you had a few interesting things to say about the festival itself.
Yeah. No, yeah, it was great last night. It's an odd one because it's only, up until that point, the cast and crew have been the only screening in front of an audience. So to be in such a huge cinema with such a massive audience was a real treat. An interesting way of seeing the film for the first time properly, I think. You know, you make these things and they're in edit suites and grading suites, but you never really see it properly until you experience it with an audience. And yes, I did say that Toronto was my favourite film festival.
Your favourite film festival in the entire world?
In the world, maybe even the universe.
Maybe.
Well, actually, no, the Mars one's quite good, but I seldom get out. They don't play my films. So.
I'm not sure how much you know about the new platform program, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I don't. I don't know much about it, but it was just a thrill to get picked. You know, to have it shown at all is great. I don't delve into the world of platform.
If you have any questions, we have volunteers with microphones, so put up your hand and we'll get a mic to you. I'll start things off. Ben, last night, as I was watching the movie, the letters WTF sort of crossed my mind at one point. And then as I rode home on the train and rode in this morning, I looked at the high-rise condos around town, and suddenly I thought of the film as sort of a time release.
Like a suppository.
No, a time release, and made me think of it more and more. Can you talk a bit about putting the film together and the message that gradually and then in some cases quite boldly unfold?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like films that take time to kind of gestate in your mind, you know. And I've always, the one that struck me the most was when I first watched The Shining, and it was kind of, I'm not drawing comparisons obviously, but the first time I watched it, and it had been built up massively as this the greatest horror film ever made, and when I blithely watched it when I was 13, went, and then over time, as I watched it again and again and again, I realised it was amazing. And I think what I learned from that, and we've tried to put in all the films we've done, is that there's kind of hidden rhythms and watchability, you know, within the movie, so that as you take time to think about it, but then as you come back to it, there's more and more information can be gathered from it. And that's something we've been kind of working on since Kill List, really.
The journey to bring this to the screen is quite a long one. Maybe, Jeremy, you can talk about it. I think originally you tried to do this back in the 70s when Ballard's novel first came out.
Yeah, you know? I liked the novel when it came out, and I was then started working with Nick Rogue, and I can hear started working with Nick Rogue, and after Bad Timing, said to Nico, "What about High Rise?" And he loved the book, but I couldn't get the rights, so I tried very hard. But the rights, this is a sort of book that the rights are always owned by somebody else who's trying to make it, and it was in that condition when Ben got hold of me. I owned the rights and I was trying to make it, and that's really what had happened. So I've had a long history with this book, and I would say that I loved Jim Ballard's books. He was a good friend of mine, and I worked for many years to adapt Crash as well, and I think his short stories in his books are full of brilliance and ideas that suit my brain and some other people's as well.
We have a question back here.
Star. Is this working? I'm just wondering what your lasting impression was from reading the book, and that's to everybody.
Oh. I think I've got kind of different experiences of reading the book and coming to it at different ages. You know, I read it first when I was 17, with a whole group of books which were, you know, kind of like entry level, esoterica, and, you know, so like Naked Lunch and Crash and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And at that point, it was more like a rites of passage. You know, you read that book and you smoke dope and do acid and all these things one might do, maybe, and listen to Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix. But then when I came back to it, kind of as an adult, the thing that struck me about it was, what I loved about it was the way that the shifting sands of the way that Ballard writes, where you think it's going to be one thing and then it confounds you, and you think it's going to be another thing. You go with these different characters and you think that they're going to come out on top, and then they don't, you know. And I think that really intrigued me, that I felt that he was kind of manipulating my understanding of what narrative was. But also, it just felt it's a book that's really timeless, you know, for me. And I think that you know, it says as much about now as it did when he wrote it, and you know, that's I guess the genius of Ballard.
Do you want us to add to that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, I love the book because I think that J.G. Ballard has a particular daring in his curiosity about placing his characters in extremity, and the book has a detachment which is confounding, because you expect him as a writer to help direct your sympathies, and he doesn't. He just describes the demise of the building and how the characters within it and its inhabitants get caught up in the sort of slide into chaos. And I've always loved the part of Ballard that I still believe he was incredibly prescient about our obsession with technology and how we outsource our needs to machines and to man-made technologies. And I think the building for him, the high-rise, was a manifestation of that. And then when you read around it, you realize that in interviews and things, he predicted all the things that are now part of our world. He predicted social media. He predicted YouTube and the industrialization of the moving image. I think this press conference is, I believe, being broadcast live across the world. And there's an interview in 1978 where he predicted that. He said it, and he found it extraordinary.
And my mum's watching it.
But he found that it's extraordinary that in 78 he saw that coming, and our relationship with technology would create shifts in our psychological patterns and the way we conceive of ourselves.
Luke? I'm quite relieved that some things were left in the book and not in the script. And I think the main one was the fact that Wilder doesn't dangle his appendage out as much as he does in the book as he does in the film. Thanks. I'm quite glad your wife chose to keep that bit out and I get to keep my clothes on for a bit longer.
It's heavy loins, though. I like the description.
Heavy loins, yeah.
I'll go with that. Do you have anything to...
For me, I suppose just the humanity in the book and the way that the characters, even in this world that's falling apart and is sort of elevated plot-wise, I felt that the characters were just so real and well drawn in the book, and I really felt for them. Obviously, I read the book actually after reading the script, which was an unusual experience. And for me, I obviously was focusing more on Helen, but and trying to glean anything I could from the book about her. But I just felt that they were really human characters that I knew or I had seen or met or could identify with. That to me is what I connect with Ballard is the humanity that he brings to these larger stories, you know.
We have a question down here.
Hi there, I'm Magda from Slant Magazine. To me, the film was largely, it reminded me of Clockwork Orange, I told you yesterday, and also American Psycho. I have the question to the cast, actually, because those performances, actually, the success of the story wouldn't be possible without extraordinary performances from actors. And those performances are quite contrary to what you've been doing so far. Largely. And I would like to know, how did you actually prepare for such a physical strain? I suppose that should have been a strain. Thank you.
I did a few things which I knew I had to do. I got in some extra games of squash before I made the film. And I did do one thing which I found, I spent a truly fascinating day with a forensic pathologist, and he took me into his workplace and he showed me what he's, you know, somebody whose professional engagement is to diagnose the cause of death. He goes into a hospital every day and he cuts people open, and I went in with him because that's what Dr. Lang is a physiologist, and that's wedded to Ballard's personal history as someone who was fascinated with anatomy. He went to Cambridge for 3 years before he became a writer because he was so fascinated by the mechanics of human engineering. He wanted to see how things worked. And that was a kind of, I remember I texted Ben that day, and it was pretty intense. It's unlike anything I've ever done. To see a human body cut open, and
he came on set, didn't he? And he said to me, "Anytime you want to come to an autopsy, just give me a ring." And I'm like, "You know what? Yeah, no thanks." Yeah.
But it was, you know, we had an interesting discussion about. I told him about the book, and he hadn't read it, but he understood what the book was getting at, and his take on it as one of the leading national physicians or pathologists in the UK was that we sometimes we lend a kind of the word I'm looking for the right word, but we give disease an almost human motivation, which he believes it doesn't have. So we talk about malignant cancer, and he was saying that cancer is not malignant; it's just another force. And the way he talked about life and death, and the randomness of health and ill health, and the way that ties into the building. I found it fascinating talking to him. He thinks we all come with a sell-by date, and he's come across people who are in the peak of health and they've been knocked off a bicycle, and people who've smoked and drank for 90 years and died in their sleep, and he sort of his perspective on life and death and psychological health was fascinating, just to come into to Ballard's examination of psychology, and also Ben and Amy's take on it.
Luke, you want to chime in on how you prepared? And you talked a
Yes.
bit last night about one of the most difficult scenes that you had.
Yeah. I mean, to answer your question, when I first read the script, there was one person that jumped out, a real person that jumped out of my head that reminded me of Wilder, and that was Oliver Reed. And I sort of left it there for a while, and then I had a meeting with the hair and makeup lady, and we started chatting, and I said, can we just have a look at some Oliver Reed pictures? And we started to look at some footage of Oliver Reed just on screen, but mainly off screen, and when he was interviewed. And you know, he was a big drinker, he was a bit of a hellraiser, and he always had that sort of fire in his eyes, which meant that if you see some interviews he does one, I think, on one set, and he's on one side of the fence, and this journalist asks him a question, and it looks like he's about to jump the fence and kill her. You know, there's this, but he doesn't, and he covers it with charm, but there's that edge to him which I thought was very interesting, and so I felt that a lot of kept him in my mind a lot when I played Wilder, and also his image in the film is quite similar to Wilder. It was the right period, it sort of looked right, my hair was the right length, we didn't have to wear any, we blow-dried it straight and grew a mustache, and you know, it felt right. So, yeah.
Me too.
Sure, why don't you?
I also grew a mustache, no. For me, it was... What? For me, the main thing was, I mean, I didn't have to do anything super physical in the film besides carry around that belly, which does hurt your back after a while, which they say real pregnancy does as well, I suppose. But for me, it was the accent. I had to, you know, I was really, I'm really a perfectionist about that kind of thing and hard on myself, so... and being an American doing a British accent is really tough. People kind of get mad at you sometimes if you don't do it right. So for me, that was the most important thing. And then I'm walking into this film with, you know, these were like iconic British people and British actors and filmmakers, and it was really scary. And my first scene was, most of my dialogue was like my big talking scene. And it was with Tom, and I was like sweating and wearing this belly and this. It was a little bit of a scary experience. So for me, that was my main thing that I really tried to get right. And as any actor will say, an accent obviously really helps you to find your way in the character and makes you feel very different immediately. So that was sort of my main preparation.
I have a question down here.
Hi. So, is this on? Yeah. Oh, God. Sorry. Yeah. So Kate Miller, Tosca Productions, and my question is for Mr. Wheatley and the cast. So on the one hand, I mean, the film is obviously very much out there. It's not really oblique. I mean, what's happening is what's happening, and it's pretty clear. And yet there seems to be, I mean, a fairly heavy allegorical element to it. And I guess what I'd like to know about the process is, did you, Mr. Wheatley, did you, you know, have the table reads where you basically kind of sat out in each scene like, okay, you know, this is what's happening and this is what's behind what's happening, or did you allow, you know, the actors the freedom to fill that space with kind of what they felt the motivations were, or what they felt the meaning behind what was happening? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think it's part of the rough and tumble of directing and blocking. You know, sometimes you do that, sometimes you don't have to. And, you know, a lot of it is witnessing. You know, you look at it, and if the everyone's on the right page with the characters to start with, then usually the instincts will kick in and get it right, you know. And you know, everyone can pretty much tell on the day if the scene isn't right, or there's an awkwardness about it where it doesn't ring true, you know. And it's trying to find that truth in those moments, you know. And it just as a human, you watch it and kind of go, am I buying it or not? Am I not buying it? Then there's the huddle and the conversation. But usually, I don't want to get too much involved. I'm not like, you know, it's directing. It's pushing, it's not telling. And I think that's the most, but there's, which is, that is a process that some people do, absolutely, and that's fine, but not me. So I think that was, so a bit of everything, really, unhelpfully.
Like one example was the painting scene. So when it's kind of you start out with the square, and then Lang is, at one point, kind of a pivotal point, really, that, you paint the wall. And, and there's other instances for each of your characters. So, like, I guess, what did you fill in that space? So, like, what did that mean to you, I guess?
What I always like to do before starting a film is I just like to sync up with the director. So before we started out, I wanted to talk to Ben and Amy about. I said, send me music, send me books, send me films that you love. That sort of give me an idea of the context, and then I do my own research, which I love. It's one of the most joyful parts of being an actor for me, is scratching around in research and giving myself an intellectual and imaginative context in which to place myself, and then be free and be instinctive. And the painting is invention by Amy, and I loved it because it seemed to be. There's a line in Ballard in the book. About Lang. He seemed to be leaving part of his mind behind, and for me that moment was there's so much anxiety and repression in Lang, so much guilt, and he's resisting the building and trying to control what he cannot control. And when he paints his room, that's when he's somehow got it's an unhinged control, but at least he's got his can of paint, which he defended with his honor, and he's allowed to paint the wall, which is what he's always wanted to do. So we both knew that it was a moment, it was a turning point for Lang, and it was a turning point in the center of the film. And it was actually great fun to shoot that. We did it once. We knew we could only do it once, because we were going to make a mess. Yeah.
We have a question in the back and then down front.
Hello, it's Henry Barnes here from The Guardian. Is societal collapse imminent? And to Tom, what's the best tasting breed of dog?
Say, what was that last bit?
What's the best tasting breed of dog?
It is imminent. Oh yeah, you can do the dog question.
I've no idea. I'm happy to say, to my knowledge, I don't think I've ever eaten dog. And I think I was given some.
You had lasagna from a supermarket?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, from the local Tesco's in Bangor. Yeah.
Dog food's quite nice, though. Few tins of those on set.
Question down front.
Was that real talk?
Jeffrey Wells, Hollywood Elsewhere. I just wanted to begin by saying I was really knocked out by the montage around the 80-minute mark when the chaos begins to really strike up. It was really quite brilliant. I just want to tell you that. But I was wondering if it's kind of a small question, but has there been an influence on your part from Lindsay Anderson films? There's kind of a straight-faced, deadpan absurdism or surrealism to his. Particularly, I was thinking Britannia Hospital. Just wondering if that was a.
Yeah, I mean, there's no escaping that, and there's no escaping Anderson because he's so brilliant and casts a massive shadow across British cinema, basically. So, but then it's him and Rogue and Borman and Ken Russell. For me, are the ones, and weirdly seem to be being slightly painted out of the history of British cinema, and it's being kind of replaced by this idea that we make socio-realist kind of dramas, which there's nothing wrong with, of course, but there seems to be a weird shift in kind of film history where that's what we do, that's our thing, people having struggles and being sad. But the more wilder end of cinema, which if you look at any of the Russell stuff, is the British cinema was pretty much at the top of the game for is kind of being slightly kind of airbrushed out. But Britannia Hospital is and Oh Lucky Man and If, all amazing and massively influential films to me, and his attitude as well.
And there's quite a large cast in this. Can you talk a bit about the casting process and who came first in all of this, and then how did you build the cast around them?
I mean, I've never worked with such a big cast, and that has there's a lot of challenges with that of just kind of tracking performances across the whole movie, and when you've got lots of different people, and they may not even have scenes together, but then there'll be close scenes very close to each other. So that there's a thing of kind of keeping mindful about how that works. And then there was a few sleepless nights about that. But then I was editing as I went along, so I could monitor a lot of how that was working. But in terms of the actual casting process, Tom was first in, and that had, you know, I think I've done interviews where I said, well, this is slightly embarrassing. I have to sit next to him and talk about this, but you know, we had a list of people that we wanted, and we had on the whiteboard in the kitchen and a little cutout of Tom's head, and then we have the thing, a year later in the film. So that was brilliant, and yeah, and it's like that. It's a kind of a rock rolling down a mountain. Once you get the first person in, then everything, finance as well, all kind of starts to slot together. So, and after that, it was. Yeah, I mean, it's just a joy, you know, working with so many people are so fucking brilliant, you know, and I'm just crawling now, and I'll stop. Stop now, yeah. I was going to get into a real, I'm not going there. You like that part, yeah. It was all so great. No, it was an absolute treat.
Oh, good question down here.
Hi, Genevieve Hassan, BBC News. Ben, you said that the biggest audience for anything that you've done before was the 2 episodes of Doctor Who that you did
most likely,
last year. Obviously, that's going to change. Are you prepared for what comes with success in terms of moving on to bigger budget films and perhaps losing some creative freedom that you are known for? And to the rest of the cast, do you have any nightmare neighbours from hell stories you can share without naming names?
Some totally indiscreet stories that you'd like to share at the live press conference. In terms of losing control, I'm not going to lose control. No, wait a minute. No, in terms of losing control, I think it's it depends what kind of a film it is. You know, I mean, I've in my career so far, I've directed a lot of TV and I've directed lots of ads, and you have various amounts of control in those things, and there's different processes, and like making a massive studio movie is very different from making an indie film. So I'm kind of prepared for that, and I don't think you can necessarily take the working processes and from one thing and swap them to another. It'd be naive to think that would work. So in Doctor Who, yeah, I'm the guy. I was in charge of how the images worked and looking after the actors, but I had no say on anything editorially, or I had a bit, but I wasn't the last word in all those positions, and I was fine with that, because I went into it with my eyes open. And also, if I'd have changed Doctor Who to be like one of my films, it wouldn't have been Doctor Who anymore, and that was the reason I was doing it, because I wanted to do it, because I was a fan. So I think it's very different, yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that the way that we've worked in the past with like kind of doing a film like Sightseers that was kind of big budget for us at the time, and then going back and doing Field in England, which was a step down the ladder in terms of budget. I think I'll always do that and try to kind of jump about in the budgets, because the budgets have different pleasures, that you can take from them.
Elizabeth, you were quoted at one point saying you don't know anyone who makes movies the way Ben does.
I was.
And maybe all the cast can talk about, was it a very different experience the way Ben works?
Very.
Yeah, very. I mean, I think his films are like no one else does this thing, I mean, I haven't personally seen anything like that. I'm sure he's inspired by people, but I think his films are like no others. So, and yeah, the experience is very rough and tumble. It's very quick. My first day was being dragged up the stairs by 2 men, 8 months pregnant, covered in blood, and it was just screaming. And I was like, the first day, and I was like, I turned to Ben, I was like, is that okay? He's like, yeah, it's great. And he was just grinning gleefully, and I was like, okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, they are like sort of no other, but everyone's different. Every process is different. Yeah. I
guess when you work with a budget of whatever size it is, you have to work with that, and I think we had a lot to cover every day. It wasn't a huge lengthy shoot. I don't know how many scenes a day we were averaging, but it was more than I've ever done. But it's nice to work like that. If you work on a big film, sometimes you can spend days on one scene. To work that fast, and sometimes the spontaneity of I remember one day we'd done a scene, and I was sitting on the sofa while everybody was moving out because I was exhausted, and I was finishing the herbal cigarette, which is disgusting, but I was puffing away because we had to stay in the room. And then you remember you said, everybody just stop and let's just film you just lying there for a while. And then we had the idea of recording myself with and drinking, and that stuff just happened as a matter of you just looking over your shoulder and seeing
it's that thing of people acting relaxed is quite hard, isn't it? Yeah. But when you see it, like on set, it's, try and catch it.
Catch it. And that's what's nice, is Ben's not afraid to do that. And I think because Ben also edits, it's funny talking, Ben also edits. Ben is here, but he edits as he goes along. It's rough, but every night we could watch the film to the day before, and we did it very often, and I've never experienced anything like that. It was quite a tool, which you either if you wanted to look, you could, and if you didn't, it's fine, but I'd never done it, and I watched a few times, and it was fascinating to see how and you put music to it. I mean, it was really, really impressive. But I think because his mind works like that once he's got it, he can move on, and that's you feel very, you trust him, and you can move at that pace when you trust somebody as much as we did.
The sheer velocity of the shoot is really inspiring. I remember my very first day, I think it was just Lang on his own, and doing the opening, moving into the place and things in the corridor, and the last 10 minutes of the day, Ben was shooting the dream sequence which is sort of directly from Ballard, where a flock of air hostesses totter towards him in his dreams. And I remember we had 10 minutes before the end of the day, and I was still there because I'd only just finished. And I watched them all come down, and then I can't remember whether we just turned to him and said, "Do you want to get in there?" And I went, "Yeah." And what should I do? And he went, "Well, maybe we could do some dancing." So we did it was a one take. It was a oneer. It was 5 to 6. We had to finish at 6. Yeah. Put on some music. I think it was Sister Sledge, Lost in Music.
And we were, It was quite a moment. Everyone looking at the monitors going, there's Tom Hiddleston dancing. It's brilliant.
We've got time for only a couple more questions. One down here.
Hi there, Josiah Hughes from Exclaim Magazine. This is for Ben, I guess, but anyone. It seems like even outside of a film like this, in teen movies too, there's so many about dystopia and the end of the world. So kind of to expand on the societal collapse question, what is it about dystopia that human beings are attracted to as a storyline and conversation to have?
I guess it's a bit like the zombie film as well, and it really, the collapse of society really isn't about society. It's about us, about our own deaths and the fear of that, and the fear of the loss of control. So I mean, you go from you're a unit in the whole big thing, and then the whole big thing can collapse as well. So I think it's a projection of that. And like the zombie film is a civil war movie, isn't it? It's going, oh God, the whole society is going to turn against me, and I've got to fight my way out. But we'll turn them into zombies because it's distasteful to shoot your neighbours, And I think that's certainly the thing of dystopia, and you start to see, you are going to die, you are, and no, don't know, you are going to die, and that will come, and it's a bit depressing, and it's kind of our way of kind of dealing with it a bit. That's my thought on it anyway.
Dan, I wonder if you could talk a bit about your use of music in the film and the soundtrack, and the obvious affection for ABBA.
I love ABBA. I'm Ben Wheatley, and I love ABBA. I don't mind saying it live on YouTube.
What was the thinking that went into this, and also using some classical music to highlight?
Well, the ABBA stuff had been written into the script. It wasn't like we'd spotted it against it. So on the day we played ABBA in on the very long crane shop thing, and we always knew that Portishead were going to do that cover as well. So that had all been planned, and Amy had written it specifically into the script. And we'd kind of got a taste for that from doing Sightseers, which had kind of dueling cover versions. And it's I just like that kind of echo where you get one statement and then you get a kind of a reprise of it, and it kind of comes back and it says it again. So the first party is, for me, they've they've taken pop music and they've tried to make it really classy and kind of slightly failed. And then when it comes back, it's like it's that music again, but it's when the building is collapsed and it's like the heart of the building talking almost, and the heart of the characters. And but also it wanted something, even though that scene was really very, very affecting anyway, without any music on it. It's the use of the. I mean, Portishead to me is always, you know, it's like a punch in the heart when you listen to that stuff. So, you know, I wanted that moment to be pretty indelible. So yeah, that's kind of where we went with that.
All right. Thank you very much. High Rise is, as I said, part of the festival's new platform program. It will have another public screening this afternoon at the Ryerson Theatre and another press and industry screening Wednesday at the Scotiabank Theatre. Thank you all for being here. Thanks, guys, for coming.
Thank you. Cheers.